Magandang hapon po sa ating lahat at welcome po sa ating Bahaginan Research Forum. The Bahaginan Research Forum is a transdisciplinary seminar and forum for the various research agenda of the College of Arts and Letters. It was launched in 2016, and the research forum has been comprised of audience development sessions of various formats, such as presentations from faculty members, lectures, and panels co-organized with groups from within and outside the college, and theme-based series delivered by invited or visiting experts from within and outside the country. This Bahaginan Research Forum is airing live at the UP College of Arts and Letters Facebook page. And this Bahaginan is presented by the UP Diliman College of Arts and Letters, the UP Diliman Department of European Languages, and the UP Diliman Office of Initiatives in Culture and the Arts. To open our program for today, let us welcome the Associate Dean for Research, Creative Work, and Publication, Dr. Jason De Guzman Petras.
Maraming salamat, Ma'am Sara, Professor Sara Tan. Magandang hapon po sa ating lahat and welcome to our Bahaginan Research Forum. Salamat po sa Department of European Languages sa pagtanggap po ng aming imbitasyon sa kolehiyo na maging pangunang Bahaginan Research Forum ngayong semestre na ito. And of course, thank you to Dr. Miguel Blázquez and Professor Wystan de la Peña for accepting our invitation to be our speakers this afternoon. Sana po doon sa ating pong gagawing bahaginan ay marami po tayong matutuhan pa tungkol sa wikang Espanyol at saka sa literaturang Filhispanic po. At kung may mga tanong po kayo mamaya, ay tiyak ko po na paunlakan po iyon ng ating mga tagapagsalita. Muli po, marami pong salamat at maligayang panonood po ng Bahaginan Research Forum.
Thank you, Dr. Petras, for your message. So, bago po tayo magsimula sa ating mga lecture, let me just explain how our program will flow today. So we will be starting with Professor de la Peña's lecture entitled Sina Lanot at Daisy Lopez at mga bagong tendensiya sa Panulaang Pilipino sa Kastila. Susundan po ito ng 15-minute na Q&A session. And then pagkatapos po ng Q&A, tutuloy na po tayo sa pangalawang lecture natin sa araw na ito. Ang title po niya ay The Didactic Potential of Spellcheckers, Improving the Spelling Accuracy in L2 Spanish Learners. It would be it's a lecture by Dr. Miguel Blázquez. And same as the first lecture po, kakaroon po tayo ng 15-minute Q&A session. So paano po tayo mag-send ng questions? You can post them on the live session on our Cal FB page. And then so post lang po tayo doon and then sasagutin po natin doon sa Q&A session after ng lecture po nila. And then after po ng mag-present po ng mga lectures, magkakaroon po tayo ng evaluation form. The e-certificates will be issued to those who will answer this evaluation forms. And the links for this evaluation will be given at the end of the live webinar. So ganun po ang magiging flow ng ating program. So now let's get to know our first lecturer for today. Ang atin pong unang lecturer ay Professor ng Español sa Departamento ng mga Wikang Europeo, si Sir Professor Wystan de la Peña. Nagtuturo din po siya ng mga modules tungkol sa Europa sa UP Center for International Studies kung saan siya ay isang faculty affiliate. Ang panitikan ng Pilipinas sa Kastila ang pangunahing larangan ng pananaliksik ni Professor de la Peña na siyang tutok ng kanyang mga publikasyon at mga panayam sa mga pambansa at international na komperensya. Nagtuturo rin siya ng pagsasalin at 2 beses nang nominado sa National Book Award Translation Category noong 1998 at 2017 para sa kanyang salin mula Kastila tungkol sa Filipino ng mga sulat ni Mariano Ponce na kinalap sa Carta sobre de la Revolución at mula Kastila tungo sa Ingles ng Retrato del Poeta and 1956, ang memoir ng makatang Kastila na si Jaime Gil de Biedma. Ngayon, pakinggan na po natin ang lecture ni Professor de la Peña na pinamagatang sina Mara Lanot at Daisy Lopez at mga bagong tendensiya sa Panulaang Pilipino sa Kastila.
Maraming salamat, Sarah. Maraming salamat sa Cal. Nakakatuwa ngayong hapon na to dahil nagkaroon ako ng nagkakataon na magbigay ng panayam na kaiba sa mga dati kong mga nauna nang bigay na panayam. Kasi unang-una, mga babaeng manunulat ang tatalakayin ko. Pangalawa, buhay pa sila pareho. Kasi lahat ng mga panayam na nagawa ko ay tungkol sa mga lalaking manunulat at lahat ay patay na. At pangatlo, kapwa ko sila mga kaibigan. Kaya madaling kalabitin para sa mga tanong. Itong panayam na to ay bahagi ng isang iniisip ko na mas mahaba-habang pananaliksik na ginagawa ko kasama ng isang dating estudyante, naging dating kasamahan sa departamento at may kaibigan na si Cecilia Cañiza. So, Cecilia ay nagkasaliksik din tungkol sa literatura sa Kastila at huli ko siya nakasama sa international na konferensya tungkol sa literaturang ito sa Belgium noong 2018. Bilang gabay sa panayam, ito yung kumbaga mapa. Una, tatalakayin ko yung traditional na diskursong literaryo ng mga manunulat sa Kastila. Ito ay matagal ko na tinawag bilang diskursong Hispanista. Katapos, pakikilala ko yung mga pangunahing manunulat na lalaki. Katapos noon, yung mga ilang manunulat na nakilala na babae. Tapos tutungo tayo sa pagsilip sa mga piling mga tula ni Mara Lanot at ni Daisy Lopez. Dahil tatlong poemaryo, tatlong libro ni Mara Lanot ang aking binasa, maraming tula yung mas maraming tula ni Mara Lanot ang ating sisilip kaysa kay Daisy Lopez. And then matapos natin silipin yung mga tula, talakayin natin yung mga bagong tendensya na makikita sa kanilang dalawa. Ang unang makatang lalaki na napakilala ko ay si Fernando Maria Guerrero. Para sa mga ilan sa UP, siguro kilala nito as pangalan ng isang kalye na malapit sa UP Chapel, Fernando Maria Guerrero Street. Sa mga tiga Department of Speech Communication Theater Arts, siya ang tiyo ni Wilfrido Maria Guerrero. Ang playwright na kung kanina natin ipinangalan yung teatro sa Palma. Ang kanyang kilalang obra ay Crisalidas. Inilathala noong 1914. Kilala si Fernando Maria Guerrero bilang masugid na tagapagtanggol ng wikang Kastila noong panahon ng Amerikanisasyon na ipinipilit ipa-aral ang Ingles sa mga Pilipino. At sumunod na makatang pakilala ko si Cecilio Apostol, abogado, naging piskal ng Maynila. Ang kanyang kilalang obra, isa niyang obra ay ang Pentelicas na ilalabas 9 na taon matapos siyang mamatay. Ilalabas ito ni Jaime de Vera. Kilala ang Pentelicas, kilala si Cecilia Apostol sa kanyang tulang Alyangki na ginawa ilang buwan matapos sumabog ang digmaang ng Pilipinas at saka Amerika. Ang paborito kong parte ng tula ay itong huli, kung saan isang libreng pagsasali ng ginawa ko na sinasabi niya na kahit maghupo pa ng mga Amerikano, mga Pilipino, hindi magiging maligaya ang mga ito dahil hanggang sa mismong hangin ng Pilipinas kasusuklaman sila. Si Manuel Bernabe ang pangatlong manunulat, kilala ko. Yung kanyang Cantos del Tropico, isa sa mga pinakamahabang antolohiya ng tula sa Kastila na inilabas noong 1929 ay puno ng mga tula na naglalaman ng diskursong Hispanista. Mamaya ipapaliwanag ko paano itong diskursong ito. Noong 1957, 3 taon bago siya mamatay, nilabas niya yung kanyang huling libro, Perfil de Cresta. Nakita niyo yung may manok? Kasi si Manuel Bernabe ay apisyonado ng sabong. At nung panahon pagkatapos ng gera, na nagkaroon ng ingay na ipagbawal ang sabong dahil ito ay sugal, tumakbo siyang kandidato para sa Congress, representante ng Parañaque. Nanalo siya. Sabi nga ni Claro Mayorecto, isang kawalan para sa literatura sa Kastila ang pagkapanalo ni Bernabe. Sana hindi na lang siya nagpakapolitiko. Si Bernabe meron namang naipasang batas. Isa nga lang, yung hindi ipagbawal ang sabong dahil ito ay kulturang Pilipino. Ang huling ipapakilala kong makata ay ang periodista at saka nobelista. Yung Mika sa Dinipa, ang kanyang tula na nanalo sa 1940 Commonwealth Literary Awards. Naging controversial to dahil sabi ng yung nanalo ng pangalawang gantimpala, hindi daw ito karapat-dapat. Si Balmori din ay kilalang nobelista. Nakikita nyo sa slide yung 3 nobela na ilalabas niya. Yung Bancarrota de Almas at Des Ojos la Flor, mga nobelang tumutukoy sa sitwasyon ng Pilipinas matapos dumating ang mga Amerikano. Yung Los Pájaros de Fuego na kailan lang nabalitaan kong ilalabas na ang salin sa Ingles na gawa sa Amerika, gawa ng isang kaibigang profesor na Kastila, ay tungkol sa karanasan ng Pilipinas noong panahon ng pananakop ng Hapon. Si Balmori at saka si Bernabe ay nagsama rin para gumawa ng balagtasan. Ito ay isang pruweba na hindi nalalayo ang panitikan natin sa Kastila sa mga pangyayaring literaryo sa Pilipinas. Nung panahon na ipinagdiriwang si Balagtas bilang dakilang personalidad sa literatura ng Pilipinas, sila rin dalawa ay naglabas ng balagtasan sa Kastila. At naging popular ito sa mga taong nagsasalita ng Kastila. Sabihin na natin na ngayon, tawag natin sa kanila mga alta sosyedad. Mga alta sosyedad nga kasi Manila Opera House pa ang pinagdarausan ng kanilang balagtasan. At naka-formal na pananamit ang suot pa ng mga manonood. Sa diskursong Hispanista, naiiba ang tingin sa Espanya. Makita sa historiografiya natin. Sa historiografiya natin, makikita na ang Espanya ay isang manunupil na kolonisyador. Pero sa diskursong Hispanista sa literatura sa Pilipinas, dalawa ang Espanya. Ang Madre Espanya at ang Espanya Negra. Ang Madre Espanya, ito yung madring tinitingala bilang ina ng kulturang Pilipino, ang ina na nagbigay ng Katolisismo, ina na nagbigay ng wikang Kastila, ina na nagbigay ng mga kaugalian na kinalakihan ng generasyong noong huling dekada ng siglo XIX at mga unang dekada ng siglo XX. Dahil dito, yung Madre España at saka España Negra, ay malinaw, maiintindihan natin yung napaka mayabong na pagpupuri sa Espanya sa mga tula sa Kastila na gawa ng mga Pilipino. Hindi kasi España Negra ang tinutukoy nila, kundi ang Madre España. Tatalakayin nila ang Madre España pag pinag-uusapan ng revolusyon. Hindi pinagtatanggi ng mga manunulat sa Kastila na nilabanan natin ng Espanya para sa ating kalayaan. Yung pagmamahal, sabihin na natin, sa Espanya, sa Madre España, ay tatawagin ni Enrique Fernandez Lumba. Si Hernandez Fernandez Lumba ay asawa nung dating profesor sa departamento, si Lelia Fernandez Lumba. Tatawagin ni Fernandez Lumba ang pagmamahal sa Espanya, sa Madre España, bilang Hispanophilia Filipina. Ngayon, parte ng diskursong Hispanista ang pagtatanggol sa wikang Kastila. At dahil sinasabi nila, ang wikang Kastila, nung umalis na ang mga Kastila, ay hindi na wikang Kastila ng wika ng Espanya. Ito ay wika na ng Pilipinas, wika na ng Pilipino. Appropriation kung sabihin natin. Kaya sa Bancarrota de Almas, meron tayong makita mga parte na tinutuligsa ang mga Pilipinong nagpipilit mag-aral ng Ingles. Ang paborito kong parte doon ay yung ito. Sabi ng isang tauhan, ang labi daw ng babaeng Pilipina ay ginawa para halikan, hindi para magsalita ng Ingles. What? Ganun daw ang tunog ng mga asong tumatahol. Kung kaya, kung titingnan natin ang panitikan sa panitikan sa Kastila ng Pilipinas, ang Pilipinas ay pinag-aagawa ng dalawang tendensya, dalawang ideolohiya. Ang ideolohiyang pabor sa Espanya at ang ideolohiyang pabor sa Estados Unidos. Sa diskursong Hispanista, ang Espanya ay kumakatawan sa mga bagay na espiritual sa kulturang Pilipino. Samantalang ang Estados Unidos ang kumakatawan sa mga bagay na materialista. Ang pagkakahaman, pagka mahilig sa banidad, at lahat ng kung anumang mga bagay. Dumako man tayo sa ilang mga manunulat babae. Ang panitikan sa Kastila ng Pilipinas matatawag natin boys club. Karamihan kasi naman manunulat na makikilala ay mga lalaki. Yung ilang mga babae na makikilala, masasabi natin tunay na magagaling. Si Evangelina Guerrero de Zacarias ay panganay na anak ni Fernando Maria Guerrero. Si Adelina Correa ay isang mistisang Kastila, anak ng isang asendero sa Negros. Mag-aaral siya sa Maynila, pero maaga siyang uuwiin sa Espanya at doon na maninirahan at hindi na siya makakabalik sa sa Pilipinas, at doon siya maglalabas ng kanyang mga libro. Si Esperanza Lazaro de Baxter ay isa ring manunulat na hindi gaanong nakikilala kasi siya ay titira sa Estados Unidos matapos mamatay ang kanyang asawa. Si Esperanza Lazaro ay isang Espanyola na nakapangasawa ng isang Pilipino na may dugong Ingles. Kaya Baxter yung si Maria Paz Zamora Mascuñana ay isa ring mistisang Kastila, Pilipina na makikilala dahil sa mga kwentong isinulat niya tungkol sa karanasan niya at ng pamilya niya nung panahon ng pananakop ng Hapon. Ito ang isang larawan ni Evangelina Guerrero, yung babae. Yung asawa niya manunulat din, si Antonio Zacarias. Ito yung kanilang kaisa-isang anak, si Graciela. Yung kaleidoscopio spiritual, ang kaisa-isang antolohiya ng mga tula ni Guerrero de Zacarias, ni Evangelina Guerrero. Ito ay inilabas 10 taon matapos siyang mamatay. Inipon ng kanyang mga kaibigan at anak. Ito naman si Adelina Guerrea, kilala sa kanyang koleksyon ng mga kwento tungkol sa Negros, Cuentos de Juana. Itong Cuentos de Juana, sabi niya sa kanyang libro, mga kwentong narinig niya sa kanyang yaya na si Juana. Meron din siyang libro ng mga tula, yung A lo largo del camino. Nakita na ito ay nilabas sa Madrid din. Maglalabas ang Instituto Cervantes ng bagong edisyon ng Cuentos de Juana noong 2010, 2009, hindi ko na matandaan yung eksaktong taon. Si Beatriz Alvarez Tardillo, na naging profesora sa UP at sa Ateneo at matagal na nagtrabaho sa National Archives natin, naglabas din ng isang libro tungkol kay Adelina Guerrea. At siya ngayon ang kinikilalang ekspertong Kastila sa manunulat na ito. Ito naman si Esperanza Lazaro de Baxter. Yung romansero sentimental ay hindi to nailabas maliban na lang ng mga ilang taon bago siya mamatay. Ito si Maria Paz Zamora Mascuñana. At ito isang artikulo tungkol sa kanya na sinulat ng isang dating kasama sa departamento, si Rocio Ortuño, na ngayon ay profesora ng Kastila sa Universidad ng Antwerp. Ngayon dumako tayo sa mga dalawang manunulat na pag-usapan natin. Unahin natin si Mara. 2 R nga pala yung Mara. Mukhang na-influencean ako ng Mara na telenovela. Si Mara. Si Mara Lanot. So, tatlong libro ang nilabas niya. Hindi ito lahat sa Kastila, kundi dahil si Mara Lanot ay sinasabing nagsusulat sa 3 wika, Ingles, Filipino at Kastila, yung kanyang mga libro ay makita nyo rin na 3 wika ang ginamit. Silipin natin ang ilang sa mga tula na ginawa niya. Naglagay ako ng salin sa Pilipino na nakadilaw. Dilawan yung salin. Ito ay isang malayang pagsasalin lang. Ginawa ko, inisip kong magamit sa aking klase sa pagsasalin. Tapos malaman ko na hindi pa pala abot ng aking mga estudyante yung antas ng Kastila na kailangan para mabasa nila yung Kastila at maintindihan. Okay, so dito sa tulang madrugada, makikita ka agad na may erotismo na ipinapasok si Marralano sa kanyang mga tula. Bakit gusto natin maghaplusan, maghalikan, magyakapan ng buong init ng araw? Bakit tayo maligaya kahit hindi nag-uusap? Walang nangyayari. So, ito pa. Dito na nakakakiliti kasi sabi niya, ikaw nangangarap ka ng pag-ibig na walang hanggan. Pangarap ko ang mga dagli ang pag-iibigan. Parang mas lalaki yung nagsasabi kaysa yung babae. Pero babae yung may akda. Tapos, ito. Sabi niya, galing tayo sa 2 magkaibang mundo. Nagsasalita ng isang wikang tila, ngunit hindi Esperanto. Tinanong ko, anong kinalaman ng Esperanto? Ang Esperanto, kung matatandaan ninyo, ay isang inimbentong wika bago pangalawang digmaang pandaigdig. At ang layunin niya ay magkaroon ng wika na maiintindihan ng lahat ng tao sa Europa na hindi kailangang may isang wikang pag-aaralan at yun lang ang wikang gagamitin. Kaya nung bago magkadigmaan, naging popular ang Esperanto. iniisip ko na, baka iniisip ni Mara na Esperanto, aliterasyon ng Espanyol. Hindi ko alam. Kailangan ko siyang tanungin. Ito, makikita natin ang banggit niya tungkol sa Mexico, kay Sor Juana Inés de la Cruz. Si Sor Juana Inés de la Cruz ay isang manunulat, babae, Mexicana, nung panahon ng Baroko, siglo XVII. Ito yung panahon na pinagbabawalan ng mga babae na mag-aral. Na dapat ang pinag-aaralan lang ay pagluluto, pagsusulsi, at paglalaba, pag-aalaga ng bata. Pero kaiba si Juana Inés de la Cruz kasi pinilit niyang mag-aral, pinilit niyang magbasa ng maraming libro. Sa totoo nga, mas ginusto pa niyang maging mongha, pumasok sa kumbento para daw siya ay makapag-aral. Dahil hindi siya ay sinisita ng mga kalalakihan dahil sa kanyang ginagawang kahiligan mag-aral. Sabi sa kanyang biografiya na yung kanyang biblioteka, yung kanyang aklatan, nung mongha siya, meron siyang 4,000 mga libro sa loob ng kanyang sa loob ng kanyang kinatitirhan. At hindi siya ordinaryong mongha kasi hindi kwarto na parang kulungan, kundi 2 palapag daw ang inookupahan niya. Yung isang palapag, tirahan niya, yung pangalawang palapag, nandoon yung mga libro, yung 4,000 libro. Lalo karami ng profesor sa UP, walang 4,000 libro. Ito si Maradano. Ito si Juana Inés de la Cruz. Sinasabing magandang babae siya. Kaya nga, nanghihinayang, maraming kalalakihan na nagmongha siya. Bilang pagkilala sa kanyang kadakilaan, yung mukha niya ay nakalagay sa pera ng Mexico sa 200. Isa pang taga Amerika Latina na kinikilala ni Mara Lanot sa kanyang mga tula ay si Isabel Allende, yung manunulat na Chilena. Dito makikita natin na kung paano nilalarawan ni Mara Lanot si Allende hindi lang bilang isang manunulat, kundi isang boses na lumalaban sa pasismo at ipinagtatanggol ang mga kababaihan laban sa machismo. Kung sa mga makapansin sa apelyido ni Allende, si Allende ay kamag-anak ng napatay na presidente na si Salvador Allende. Nung panahon ng kudeta ni Augusto Pinochet, si Isabel Allende ay nakatira sa Peru. Wala siya sa Chile noon. Ito isang tula ni Mara na masasabi kong isang afirmasyon ng kanyang kababaihan. Sabi niya, iniisip ko na ang kausap niya ay lalaki. At sabi niya, di mo maaring angkinin anumang bahagi sa akin. Hindi ang utak, hindi ang aking kaluluwa. Dahil lang ang puso ko'y ulan na umahalik sa mga puno, sa mga paru-paro, pumapatak sa tuyong lupa upang mabuhay ang mga halaman, pumapatak sa mga ilog para sa mga isda, pumapatak para hawiin ang mga luha ng mga bata, mga babae, na ang balat nangitim sa gulpi. Makita natin dito na si Mara tinutukoy ang babae, hindi balang babae lang, kundi babae bilang figura ng kalikasan na nag-aalaga sa planeta. Ito rin ang isang nakakatuwang tula ni Mara. Nais kitang yakapin pero di ko ginagawa. Nais kitang halikan ngunit di ako nangangahas. Nais kong maramdaman ang init ng iyong hubad na katawan, pero di ko magawa. Sa unang pagkakataon, makakabasa ako ng tula sa Kastila, gawa ng Pilipino, na bukas sa inilalahad ang pagnanasa sexual ng isang babae. Kay Mara ko unang mababasa ito. Ito rin, sir. Isang tula na sabi, iniisip kita. Ako ay alikabok, ako ay lupa. Kapag may sumasabog na eroplano, kapag lumilindol at naglalabasan ng mga ahas, iniisip kita, ina, aking ina, senyora ng langit. Isa itong tula na sinulat, na iniisip na si Maria bilang kausap. Isa rin itong interesanteng tula ni Mara, nag-uusap lang tayo. Pinag-uusapan daw yung kalokohan ng gobyerno, ang pagtalikod ng media sa laban ng bayan, ang tunggalian ng mga kasarian. Makita nyo, bukas na inilalahad yung mga problema ng lipunan. Pinag-uusapan kung paano matamo ang kapayapaan sa mundong nais magkaanak na pinapatay naman pagkatapos. World peace. Di pa rin nalalayo si Mara Lanot sa pagnanasang magkaroon ng world peace. Ang beauty contest. So, kung ano nung pinag-uusapan nila, kausap niya, pero sabi, pero ni minsan hindi tayo nagniig. Pagniig. Ang literal na sabi, hindi tayo nagniig dahil mas mahalaga sa atin kung paano mabuhay. Hindi tayo magiging parang higanting cactus na mag-isang namamatay sa tuktok ng mga bundok. As ito pa, isang paglalahad ng pagnanasa ng isang babae. Gusto kong maligo sa liwanag ng iyong mga mata. Matulog ng hubad, kabalot sa iyong mga braso. Medyo shocking para sa akin noong una ko itong mabasa kasi ito ang unang pagkakataon na lalabas na ganito kabukas sa literatura sa Kastila. Yakapin mo ako na parabang nasa katawan ko ang iyong kaluluwa. Na parabang ngayon ang magpakailanman at ang ngayoy walang hanggan. Nakita natin dito sa tulang Mexico, ang pagbanggit sa Mexico, ang pagbanggit sa Quetzalcoatl, pagbanggit sa Santa Maria de Guadalupe, ang Birhen ng Guadalupe, ang pagbanggit kay Emiliano Zapata at kay Pancho Villa, mga revolusyonaryong Mexicano. Makikita natin na merong yung inspirasyong poetiko ni Mara Lanot ay nakatuon sa Mexico. Hindi gaya ng mga manunulat natin sa Kastila na lalaki ay nakatutok sa Espanya. Kaya matapos basahin yon, yung Mexico, nakakatuwa tingnan ang kanyang pananaw tungkol sa Espanya. Dahil hindi kita kilala, gusto ko makilala ang iyong mga kabundukan. Gusto ko makilala ang ibang inang bayan ng aming mga bayaneng sina Rizal at Luna, ang nakaraang ina, ang reyna ng Pilipinas, na ni minsay di kami iniwan. Makikita nyo, sabihin nyo, bakit hindi kami iniwan? Dito papasok yung diskursong Hispanista upang maintindihan ito. Ito ang Espanya na Madre Espanya. Hindi ito yung Ma-Espanya Negra. Pagpatuloy ng tula, gusto kong maunawaan ang mga sigaw na natutuwa sa bawat patak ng dugo ng kaawa-awang toro. Gusto kong marinig ang awit ng mga Hitano, kaunawa ng init ng flamenco. Ito ay mga imahen ng Espanya. Ang toro, ang Hitano, at ang flamenco. Gusto raw niyang maunawaan. At higit sa lahat, gusto niya maunawaan kung bakit ang mga dating sinakop ay gusto maglibot sa Espanya sa kabila ng mga ginawa ng espada at ng krus. Alam natin na tinutukoy nito ang kolonisasyon sa kabila ng lahat. Ito ay magandang itapat sa sinasabi ng mga lalaki. Wala kang kinakantahan sa pag-awit tungkol sa mga kalalakihan dahil bulol silang magsalita. Sa unang tatlong verso, makikita natin na ipinagwawalang bisa ang sinasabi na ang mga lalaki ang may hawak ng kapangyarihang magsalita, may hawak ng kapangyarihang magtula. Hindi, sila ay bulol magsalita. At ipinakita at pinaliwanag ni Mara kung ano itong kabululan na ito. Ang pagkalbo sa mga bundok, ang pag-abandona sa mga pamilya, at ang pagkakalat ng karahasan sa lupa. Diba? Dahil hindi daw natin magawang pag-usapan ang birhinidad ng mga lalaki, pagkadalisay, na mga bagay na mahalaga para sa mga kababaihan, sa anumang bansa, sa anumang panahon. Kaya nga ang pag-awit tungkol sa mga kalalakihan ay pag-awit sa kawalan. Ito magandang ginawa ni Mara Lanot na paglaro sa mga salita. Dito, sa tulang LDC Kilakere, sabi niya siya ay mahal niya. Parang pinirapiraso yung katawan ng babae sa paningin ng lalaki. Pinapantasya niya ang kanyang dibdib, dalawang kalapating nasa pugad. Ang kanyang mga brasong tila mga bungkos ng ubas. Ang kanyang mga kamay, kanyang mga malalambot na pigi, ang kanyang mga hita, katawan. May sensasyon na parang pinaghihiwa-hiwa at sa isang pinapakita yung mga parting pinaghati-hati. Ang kanyang mga tuhod, ang kanyang masasarap na binti, ang kanyang mga paa. At tapusin ang tula ng, sabi niya siya'y mahal niya at wala na siyang alam at puno ng kadalisayan. Buhat ng isinilang ay nagbabanat ng puto, walang panahong mangarap at ngayon nasa katayan. So yung kanyang, parang may mali sa salin ko. Yung tinapos yung tula, sinasabing matapos makita na ilarawin yung babae bilang pirasong parte ng katawan niya, yung babae na hindi naman nangangarap tulad ng lalaki na naghahanap buhay buhat ng maliit pa, ngayon nagtatrabaho sa karniseria o katayan ng mga hayop sa palengke. So, makita natin ito yung ilan sa mga imahe ng Mexico na ilalabas ni Mara sa kanyang tula. Si Frida Kahlo, hindi ko na inilagay yung tula tungkol kay Frida Kahlo, si Pancho Villa, si Emiliano Zapata, at saka Nuestra Señora de Guadalupe. Pag-uusapan din ni Mara Lanot ang tungkol sa mga revolusyonaryang Pilipina. Pero sinasabi niya, yung mukha ng mga revolusyonaryang Pilipina noong 1898 ay isang mukha lang yon. Si Tandang Sora bilang ina at tagapangalaga, si Gabriel Silang, si Teresa Banwa, isang mukha lang sila. Dahil mayroong iba pang mga mukha. Yung mga mukha ng mga babaeng tahimik lang. Nagluluto, naglilinis sa araw-araw, nagsisilang sa mga sanggol, nagtitiis tuwing gabi, mga babaeng hindi binabanggit, hindi nakikita sa kasaysayan. Mga sundalo ng buhay. Sabi niya, ang mga Pilipina ngayon ay hindi raw nalalayo sa mga revolusyonarya noon. Ito naman yung sa tulang dasal, nakausap ang ina ng Diyos. Sinasabing, dahil isang babae, walang nakakakilala sa iyo, pero kilala ka namin. At dahil ikaw ay nasa aming pag-iisip, nasa aming mga puso, ina ng Diyos, ina ng lahat, at ng buong mundo, babae higit sa lahat ng mga babae, nabubuhay ka, buhay ka. Isang afirmasyon na buhay ang ina ng Diyos sa buhay ng mga babae. Cadena de Amor, ito yung pangunang tula na lalabas sa seksyong Kastila nung librong Cadena de Amor. Sabi niya, ang Cadena de Amor ay isang rosaryo binubuo ng kanyang mga mahal sa buhay. At ito ay binubuo lang hindi lang ng mga tao, kundi ng kalikasan, mga hayop, pusa, aso, ibon. Mga ibon na naghahatid ng awit ng kalayaan, awit ng kapayapaan, buong kalikasan, nagtatangkol sa buhay. Tatangkol sa buhay buhat sa unang iyak ng batang bagong silang at sa huling buntong hininga ng isang matandang namamatay. Ito pa isang tula. Hindi ko minsan naintindihan ang Toreo. Inilalahad hindi niya maintindihan kung bakit merong torohan sa Espanya. Kahit sa Mexico meron. Hindi niya maintindihan bakit natutuwa ang tao. Gusto nilang dumanak ang dugo ng toro. Bakit kailangan pahirapan ang toro na walang kasalanan? At patayin matapos pabulag sa galit sa dami ng sugat na natamo. Sinasabi niya, ang toro, para sa mga nanonood, ay isang hayop lang sa loob ng Coliseo na kung saan yung mga taong nanonood, nagsisigaw, ay hindi parang mga tao, kundi parang mga demonyo. Isang kritika ito sa tarumakya. Ang wika ng mga kamay. Ito ay isa na namang halimbawa ng erotismo sa mga tula ni Maralan. Sa gabing tulad nito, gugunitain ko kung paano maglakad ang mga kamay, kung paano tumakbo, sumayaw, umawit sa mga burol, sa dibdib, sa ilog, sa mga hita, sa isang nakatagong gubat, puno ng samyo ng ligaw na bulaklak. Tatalunin si Jesus Balmori sa erotismo ni Jesus Balmori. Isa pa rin makikita natin kay Maralanot ang pagtula tungkol sa mga bagay na pang-araw-araw. Tulad nito, nung sumakay ang mga makata sa e-jeepney, babanggitin niya ang e-jeepney, babanggitin niya ang eroplanong grounded sa Europa dahil sumabog ang isang bulkan sa Iceland. Babanggitin niya ang polusyon sa Metro Manila. Babanggitin niya ang kaunting iniisip niyang konting pagtulong na mabawasan ang polusyon sa planeta. Mga usapin sa pang-araw-araw na buhay. Hindi lang Mexico ang papasok sa mga tula ni Mara, kundi Cuba. Pati Cuba, makita natin na malakas ang pasok ng Amerika Latina sa panulaan ni Mara. Kaya nga, nasa isip daw niya ang Cuba, nasa imahinasyon, maliit na isla may malalaking tagumpay. Pero ito, isang lipaing hindi pa raw niya nadadalaw. Subalit, sinasayaw niya ang mambo, ang rumba, ang cha-cha-cha, ang salsa, mga sayaw na sinasayaw sa Cuba. Pinapakinggan ang tunog ng mga tambol na galing Africa. Pinapakinggan niya, alam niya ang mga magandang awitin. Awitin ng mga pakikibaka at pag-ibig. Nasabi niya, itong mga awit na to, hindi pinaghihiwalay ang mga puti at mga itim. Nakaiba sa karanasan sa Estados Unidos. Ito naman sa tulang ito, sa maiksing fragmentong kinuha ko, makita natin ang Colombia. Dun sa huling apat na salita. Ang titulo ng nobela ni Gabriel Garcia Marquez. Umuulan ngayong malamig na gabi, walang tigil ang marahan na pagpatak. Iniipon ng 100 taong lumbay. 100 años de soledad. Malaki ang impluensya ng figura ng Amerika Latina sa mga tulad ni Mara Lanot. Sa mga tula ni Mara Lanot, makikita rin ang pagtuligsa sa machismo. Sa tulang machista, pinapakita niya ang simula ng buhay mag-asawa. Tinatrato daw na anghel, prinsesa, rosas, babasagin ang babaeng, asawang babae. Pero unti-unti magbabago at kapag hindi raw nasusunod ang lalaki, sinasampal ang babae, pupunitin ng kanyang mga damit, sisirain ng kanyang mga sapatos. Sinasatawag sa Kastila na violensya domestika. Ika natin, no? Sa tulang machista, nagsimula ang tula sa sabi na itinatanghal ang asawang babae. Pero unti-unting magbabago yung lalaki at naging violente siya sa kanyang asawa. Sa bandang huli ng tula, bandang bahagi, huling bahagi, sasabihin itong babae, pupunta sa kanyang konfesor, sa pare, at sabihin ng tatapatan kanyang problema. Sabi ng tula na, sabi ng pare, normal naman daw ang di pagkakasundo sa mag-asawa. At dahil siya ay asawa, hindi siya maaaring makipaghiwalay. At tulad ni Kristo, si Kristo ang gagawing halimbawa, kailangan niyang magdusa at pasanin ang kanyang krus. Ang asawa niya, ang kanyang krus. Sinasabi sa diskurso machista. Hindi machista to, ibang tula na to, nagkamali lang ako. Sinasabi niya, Pilipina ako, sa mga ugat ko nananalaytay mula sa aking ama, ang dugo ng isang priling Español at isang taal na Pilipina. Sa parte ng aking ina, dugo ng isang negosyanteng Taino at isang lumad na Pilipina. Ang nakakatawag pansin dito ay yung salitang Taino. Kasi ang Taino ay katutubo sa Amerika Latina na isasama ni Mara sa kanyang tula bilang isa sa kanyang mga ninuno. Hindi gaya ng mga manulat na lalaki na sasabing Kastilang lalaki, babaeng Pilipina, yun ang Pilipino. Pero dito kay Mara, sinasama niya yung dugo ng mga Taino. Isang muling banggit sa Mexico, sa kabundukan ng Oaxaca, may taong nakatira na pangalan si Maria Sabina, isang manggagamot ng katawan at kaluluwa. Kurandero ang tawag sa kanya, kurandera sa Makata, pero namatay siya sa gutom, wala siyang kama, wala siyang bahay, kahit naman siya iniidolo ng mga hippie at ng Beat Generation. Hippie, ito yung mga late 60s, 70s. Beat Generation, ito yung late 1940s, 1950s. Pero sabi sa tula, buhay pa si Maria Sabina sa mga feminista ngayon. Ito ay yung hindi ako babae para lang sa isang bansa. Ito, pinapakilala siya bilang babae na para sa mundo, mamamayan ng mundo. Walang puwersa armada, hindi siya babae para lang sa isang bansa, bahagi ako ng isang bayang nangangarap ng kapayapaan sa mundo. Hindi mundong naghahati-hati sa ibang bansa at nag-aaway-away. Ito pa rin isang tula na afirmasyon sa sarili na hindi daw niya tinitingnan ang sarili gamit ang mga mata ng lalaki na para lang siyang obheto sa kama, para siyang anino o imahe ng birhen, isang estatwa nagawa sa bato o plastiko, puno ng kolorete, parang binibentang kalakal. Tinitinda niya ang sarili, natutuwa siya sa kanyang katawan, sa kanyang pag-iisip, sa kanyang mga pangarap. Dahil tinitinda niya ang sarili, gamit ang sariling mga mata. Medellin, ito, banggit tungkol sa Colombia. May ngiti tulad ng isang malagong hartin ang mga kababaihan sa kalye. Ang mga sundalo nagdadasal sa katedral upang matapos na ang gera sa droga at naging bulaklak at puno ang mga armas para sa mga ito. Makita natin na muli ang nanasa para sa kapayapaan. Ngayon tumako tayo kay Daisy, kaibigang Daisy. Nung huli kami nagkausap ni Daisy, kagabi lang yun pala, sabi niya, kung pag-uusapan mo yung En la Línea del Horizonte, hindi yon ang pinaka-puso daw ng kanyang pagtula. Kasi una ko na sinabi na may tendensyang mysticismo yung mga tula niya sa En la Línea del Horizonte. Sabi ni Daisy, hindi. Napapailing daw siya kapag pinapakilala siyang manunula ng mysticismo. Sabi niya, mas gusto daw niya makilalang makata, may akda na nagsusulat tungkol sa mga pang-araw-araw na karanasan. Kaya hindi ko na muna gagamitin ng una kong ginamit na slides tungkol sa En la Línea del Horizonte at humingi ako ng permiso sa kanyang gamitin yung slides na ipinakita niya sa isang webinar sa Espanya tungkol sa kanyang pagtula. So, ito yung kwento. Drawer. Sabi niya, doon siya nagtago ng mga sinulat ng mga tula, naninilaw ng araw, panahon na nakatira siya pa sa Espanya. At yung iba doon tawag natin scrap paper, nasa mga pahina na may nakasulat, may naka-imprenta, yung sa likod, wala, doon siya nagsusulat. Nakikita ito ni Andrea Gallo, naka-literary agent niya, at sasabihin, at mamimili ito ng mga tula. May mga gusto si Daisy na sana maisama, pero ang mga pinili ni Andrea Gallo ay may paksang religyoso. Yun ang inilagay sa librong En la Línea del Horizonte. Itong Despedida para una Bienvenida, pinapaliwanag ni Daisy na itong tula na ito ay tungkol sa kanyang kaibigan na nagkasakit matapos pumunta sa kampo, sa bukid. At yung sakit na yun, napagalaman na baka loka o mad cow illness. Matatandaan nyo, ito ay sumabog sa balita noong 1990s at ang isang naapekto ng maluba ay ang United Kingdom. So sinabi niya, yung walang sobrang salita doon sa kanyang tula. Walang labis, lahat kailangan, lahat may meaning. Kaya yung mga salita hota, kasi yung kanyang kaibigan ay taga-Aragon, at dahil yung kanyang kaibigan nakakaramdam ng sakit, alarido budo, cicatrices, beklat, dahil sa mga tusok ng mga karayom, at sarkas kasi asul ang mata ng kanyang kaibigan. Ito naman yung kasko historiko ay isang kompetisyon ng pagtula. Sumali siya dito. Number 20 siya, top 20 siya sa piniling 120. Yung 120, yun ang mga inilagay sa antolohiya. May 450 mga sumali galing sa Espanya at Amerika Latina. Mga iba doon, ay mga kilalang mga manunulat. ito yung tula na isinali niya sa competition niya. Saudade. Saudade sa Panulaang Kastila ay tula ng kalungkutan. Kadalasan, ito ay tula tungkol sa pagnanasang makabalik sa iniwanang bayan. Ito yung continuation. Tapos, ito pa, may isa pang contest na sinalihan si Daisy. So si Daisy, kahit isang libro lang yung nailabas so far, abala sa pagsasali sa mga kompetisyon sa pagtula sa Espanya at Amerika Latina. Sa Argentina ginanap ito at mapapabilang siya yung tula niya ay mapapabilang sa antologiyang ilalabas ng mga nag-organisa ng kompetisyon. Pero Verde ay isang cultural magazine na inalabas taon-taon ng Embahada ng Espanya sa Pilipinas at doon nilathala yung kanyang tulang Ondoy and Tres Actos. Wala siyang salin kasi dapat sa mga estudyante ko ipapasalin. Isang panawagan sa pagsumite ng mga tula sa Convocatoria International Dia de Mujer de Poesía Femenina, lumabas na pang 4 na po si Daisy sa nasabi na dumaong naman tayo sa ilang mga tulang doon sa kanyang En la Línea del Horizonte. Nakita natin ang tula niya para sa Virgen de Antipolo, ang Nuestra Señora de la Paz y el Viaje. Dito, kinikilala niya na ang Virgen na to ay galing sa Amerika Latina. At ito ay hindi isang Virgen puti, kundi Virgen morena. Ito ay nakakaantig ng puso itong si Detener Sugiera kung maari ko lang gawin. Sabi niya, kung maari lang daw niyang gawin na pigilan ng mga sundalo na pagpokpok ng mga pako sa katawan ni Kristo. Maari lang daw niyang bigyan ng isang gesto de paz. Isip ang gesto de paz. Ikaw, Daisy, ang ginagasalin, ha? Maari daw niyang pakitaan ng isang akto ng kapayapaan yung nagagalit na sundalong Romano. Pero hindi daw to papayagan ng ina Jesus. Hindi daw papayag si Jesus. Hindi daw papayag na makialam sa plano ng langit na turuan ng mundo. Ito isang tula ni Daisy. Ito ay isang fragmento lang na naisip ko, hawig na hawig sa tula ni Santa Teresa de Jesus ng Avila. Nangangasa kong mahalin ka dahil sa pangangahas na mahalin ka, nagagawa kong mas lalo kang mahalin. Tapos ito ang inyong mga kamay. Ito sinasabi niya, nilalarawan niya ang kamay ng Diyos. Ang kanyang kamay. Sabi niya, yung kamay ko ang liit. Kahit maraming bitbit, hindi mapupunuan ang kamay ng Diyos. Ngayon, bakit may mga bagong tendensya? Bakit hihiwalay sa diskurso Hispanista? Ito makita natin, no? Hindi natin makita ang diskurso Hispanista kay Lanot at kay Lopez. Mapapalitan yung diskursong inang bayan ng diskursong inang Maria o inang Birhen. Nakita din ang intimismo, ang pagtalakay sa mga bagay-bagay na pang-araw-araw. Lalabas ang usaping pangkababaihan, ang afirmasyon ng pagkababae, ang mga karanasang pang-araw-araw. Bakit may lalabas na ganitong mga tendensya? Ito yung aking mga panukala na pag-aaralan pa namin ng gusto ni Cecilia Cañiza. Hindi mga lalaki si Lopez at saka si Lanot. Mga babae sila na nabuhay sa panahon na mas maigting ang pagkilala sa kakayahan ng kababaihan. Tapos iba na ngayon ang panahon at ideolohiya ng lipunang Pilipino tungkol sa lagay ng wikang Kastila sa Pilipinas. Dati, tinitingnan ng Kastila at Espanyol bilang wika ng pananako. Ngayon, itanong nyo sa mga kabataan, sa mga estudyante ng UP, sa mga nagtatrabaho sa call center, ito ay wika na may halagang ekonomiko. Problematiko na ang usapin tungkol sa publiko ng literatura sa Kastila. Mababanggit ito ni Daisy. Para kay pa magsulat, wala namang magbabasa. Para kay pa magsulat, lalo ng tula, wala naman daw nagbabasa ng tula. Problematiko ang usapin tungkol sa bakit nagsusulat pa sa Kastila. Hindi naman magsulat sa Pilipino at sa Ingles, bakit pa sa Kastila? Tapos ito pa, hindi lang galing sa Espanya ang pinanggagalingan ng inspirasyon. Pumasok na rin ang Amerika Latina. Nakikita natin to bahagya kay Daisy at kitang-kita to sa mga tula ni Mara Lanot. Maganda sana may picture silang dalawa, pero walang picture So pinagsama ko na lang sila. Hindi sa Espanya, hindi rin sa Amerika Latina, pero nagsama sila sa India.
Maraming salamat, Professor de la Peña, for that very interesting lecture. Bago po natin buksan ang Q&A session natin, we would like to acknowledge the presence of the Dean, our Dean at the College of Arts and Letters, Dr. Jemuel Naval. At iniimbitahan po natin siyang magbigay ng maikling mensahe para sa atin bago po tayo tumuloy sa ating Q&A session.
Salamat, Sarah. Wala na yata tayong oras. Anyway, buenas tardes, kay Wystan, klase ko yan nung araw, So, naalala ko tuloy yung mga guro ko sa Spanish, Wala na silang lahat, Nandiyan pa naman si Doña Paching Hidalgo, Pero si Senyor Parolan, naabutan mo ba yun, Wystan? At syempre, the great Pablo K. Botor, mga naging guro ko, So, meron pang isa, 4 yun 12 ang natin si Senyora Estanislao, naalala mo yun, Senyora Estanislao. So anyway, malaking bagay itong tinalakay ni Wystan, Naalala ko tuloy na minsan naging salalaya ng Makata at kwentistang Filipino ang panitikan ng Espanyol. Of course, nandyan si Rizal at yung mga binanggit ni Wystan, sina Jesus Balmori, sina Claro Mayo Recto, Manuel Bernabe, na ano ba to? Lolo ni Cochise, na Bernabe. Siyempre Cecilio Apostol, 'di ba? So maraming mga iba pa, So kundi dahil sa kanila, yung imahe natin hindi ganoon kahusay. So nakatulong yung imahe. Makita naman kanina, yung mga sa tula, na sinali ni Mara, ibang klase. So makikita mo doon yung gilas, kumbaga parang naandun yung masyadong romantiko, mapangahas, pero elegante, yung dating. So malaking bagay ito para sa atin dahil bahagi ng kasaysayan natin ang wikang Espanyol. Sana hindi pa rin makalimutan ng makatang Pilipino. So maraming metaporang iniluwal ang panulaan ng Espanyol. So maraming salamat sa bahaginan na ito, meron pa tayong susunod, at bigyan natin ng maraming pagkakataon ang susunod na magsasalita, buenas tardes o bienvenido, kay Dr. Miguel Blázquez. So magandang hapon sa inyong lahat. Maraming salamat.
Maraming salamat po, Dr. Naval, Dean Naval. Bago po tayo tumuloy sa nabanggit po ni Dean Naval na kay Dr. Blázquez, i-open po muna natin ang Q&A session natin para dun sa lecture ni Professor de la Peña. So meron na po tayo dito mga katanungan. Kung meron pa po kayo mga katanungan para sa lecture po ni Professor de la Peña, pwede niyo po silang i-post doon sa ating Facebook Live sa comments po nito. So unang tanong po para kay Sir Wystan. Nabanggit niyo po na nagsusulat si Mara Lanot sa 3 wika. Sa inyo pong pagsusuri, may mga tiyak na tema po ba na sa Espanyol niya isinusulat?
Yung mga tula ni Mara sa Kastila, sa karaniwan extension ng kanyang mga tula sa Pilipino at sa Ingles. Lalo yung tema tungkol sa mga kababaihan. Ang wala lang ang hindi lang makikita sa mga tula niya sa Ingles at sa Pilipino, na makita sa Kastila, ay yung tema tungkol sa Amerika Latina na binanggit doon naman. Kay Frida Kahlo, kay Sor Juana Inés de la Cruz, Zapata, Pancho Villa.
Salamat for that, Sir Wystan. Pangalawang katanungan po, sa panahon na hindi na maraming mga Pilipino ang gumagamit or nakakaalam ng Espanyol, bakit kaya may mga makatang pinipiling sumulat sa wikang ito? Na nabanggit nyo kanina dun sa problematiko na Sige po, sir.
Ano yan laging tinatanong yan. Lalo't yung mga mas kilalang manunulat ngayon, natatanda na. Yung binanggit ni Dina Val, si Edmundo Parolan, pareho pala namin naging profesor, nasa 80 na. Pero naglabas pa siya mga 5 years ago ng isang nobela. Si Guillermo Gomez Rivera, almost pushing 90 na. So, nagsusulat pa rin. So, ang tanong, bakit sila nagsusulat? May isa akong magbibigay na maikling sagot. Internet. Kasi lumaki na ang publiko ng manunulat na Pilipino sa Kastila. Hindi na lang mga Pilipino sa Pilipinas, kundi mga Hispaniko sa buong mundo. Gawa ng internet. Hanapin nyo sa internet yung Revista Pilipina. Ito ay isang magazine online na sinimula ni Edmundo Parola noong 1997. At doon, naglalabas siya ng mga artikulo tungkol sa Pilipinas, tungkol sa Espanya, tungkol sa mundong Hispaniko. Naglalabas siya ng mga tula na sinusulat ng Pilipino. Kaya napasama ang Pilipinas sa mundong Hispaniko gamit ang internet. Kaya kung meron man nagsusulat, hindi sa papel kadalasan, kundi sa cyberspace. Dahil hindi na basta Pilipino lang ang publiko. Mas malaki na ang publiko niya. Pero publikong nasa labas ng bansa.
Okay, salamat po sa sagot, Sir Wystan. Huling katanungan po from FRFB Live kay Joseph Solis Alcaide Alberici. Ano po ang inyong pananaw na ibalik ang pagtuturo ng wikang Espanyol sa ating mga paaralan sa makabagong panahon at sang-ayon po ba kayo na ituro ang Espanyol sa elementary at secondary level? Medyo tangent ng question pero tignan natin kung anong sagot ni Sir Wystan.
Ituro sa pilitan, hindi. Ituro na gusto ng mag-aaral, oo. Ito yung karanasan ng Pilipinas na hindi kasi inaaral mabuti pero sinayang natin ang pagkakataon na magkaroon tayo ng 3 henerasyon ng mga intelektual o mga nakatapos ng pag-aaral sa universidad na marunong mag-Ingles, marunong ng mga wikang Pilipino, at marunong mag-Kastila. Kasi hindi maayos ang ginawang pagtuturo ng Kastila. Inabutan ko yun kaya isa ako sa mga umaangal noon sa maling pagtuturo ng Kastila. Tawag ko nga doon yung pagtuturo o-as-a, amos-aysan. Siguro marami sa mga nag-aaral ay dumaan doon. Hindi dapat ganoon. Dahil doon nagkaroon ng negatibong imahe ng Kastila. Natatawa nga ako sinasabi, Hindi dapat pag-aralan ng Kastila dahil wika to ng mga manlulupig. Ang nakakatawa doon, sinabi yon gamit ang isa pang wika ng isa pang manlulupig. Sinabi sa Ingles. Don't study Spanish because it's the language of a colonizer. Sinabi yung gamit ang wika pa ng isang colonizer. Kaya iba na kasi ang pananaw sa Spanish ngayon. Ito ay isang wika ng komersyo. Ito ay wika ng pandagdagang talastasan. Ito ay wika ng pagkakakitaan. Tanong nyo sa mga nagtatrabaho sa contact industry kung gaano kalaki ang sweldo nila kumpara sa mga English lang ang bitbit na wika. Naiinggit kami kasi mga estudyante namin sila. Tapos, ganun ang sweldo nila. Kaya maraming na-engganyo, mali yung engganyo sa Spanish, maraming nagkakaisip na mag-aral ng Kastila dahil sa dahilang ekonomiko. Pero dapat ito voluntaryo. Gusto ng bata, gusto ng tao. Hindi dapat sa pilitan.
Salamat, Sir Wystan, para sa mga sagot niyo po dun sa mga katanungan natin from our audience. And thank you po dun sa inyong very interesting lecture about the new tendencies, ng tendensiya sa Panulaang Filhispanic ko. Ngayon po, dumako na po tayo sa ating second lecturer. Let me just introduce our second lecturer, Dr. Miguel Blázquez. He is an assistant professor and the Spanish section coordinator at the University of the Philippines, Diliman, Department of European Languages. He has a PhD in Spanish philology from the UNED and an MSc in Applied Linguistics and Second Language Acquisition from the University of Oxford. He's also the author of several articles published internationally in renowned journals such as Applied Linguistics or Language Learning and Technology. Let us now listen to Dr. Blázquez's lecture entitled The Didactic Potential of Spellcheckers, Improving the Spelling Accuracy in L2 Spanish Learners.
Today I'm gonna talk you about a research project that I've been doing for a while and that I am actually still working on it. I intend to publish the last bit of this project very soon. So, well, okay, today I'm gonna talk you about a research project that I've been doing for a while and that I am actually still working on it. I intend to publish the last bit of this project very soon. So, well, it's all about the spell checkers are their didactic potential and to teach spelling accuracy to Spanish learners. Why is spelling important? Well, for writing, spelling affects communication. It's harder to read a text if there are spelling mistakes, and actually it can get to confusion. But it also interfere with conceptualizing content and formulating language, in the sense that if I'm thinking of how to spell a word, maybe I'm not gonna able to express what I want to say. I'm overloading my cognitive resources. And obviously, it is also important for language learners, as this is something that we teachers care about when we are reading your writing composition and we evaluate you. No, we mark you if you have any spelling mistakes. It's also important for vocabulary acquisition, because when we store a word in our lexicon, we just don't know the score. We store the meaning, but also their phonetic form, but also their spelling form. I remember words either by their sound, but also by their spelling. So actually it's kind of important, but it has been neglected almost every time in language learning, since people believe that is accessory, something that we learn implicitly, and especially in writing systems that are kind of shallow. What does it mean? That there are correspondence between grapheme and phonemes, like it happens in Spanish. No, every letter that we sound with early write it, no? However, L2 learners of Spanish appear to make frequent spelling errors. Sanchez Jimenez in 2010 found out that 10% of the words that the students of his study wrote were actually misspelled. Me, myself, I found that 9% of them, 8.5, were misspelled. We are talking an average of 1 word out of 10, which is something to take into consideration. Why is spelling in Spanish difficult? Well, because there are graphemes that represent different sounds. Like, for example, the grapheme C represents the sound Z, but also the sounds K, like in cinto or canto. But there are phonemes that are represented by 2 graphemes, like, for example, the sounds G, G, G. I can represent it by G or a J, like in ingerir or ingerir. Or even we have graphemes that represent no sound, like the H. Hecho and hecho sound exactly the same, but one is written with H and the other one doesn't. Also, the rules that govern the placement of prosodic stress markers are difficult. We have más and más, different meanings, but different spellings, marrón versus marrat, that we can see that the last syllable is the one with the stress, but one is accentuated and the other one doesn't. And also because the first language can interfere with the second language. For example, we have found that many L2 learners of Spanish that are Anglo-Saxon made this kind of error. Asociación, they write it with 2 S, just because in English is written with 2 S and not in Spanish. The same it happened with Arabs. They tend to write pilo instead of pelo, just because in Arab, E and E are the same sound or very close. And Japanese students and Chinese tend to write temporada instead of temporada, because for them, the R and the L are sounds that are quite similar. So what can we do to teach them? Well, one of the things that teachers do is to give feedback, when students are writing their composition. And what is written corrective feedback? Is what teachers provide on grammar, vocabulary, content, and mechanics. And it involves error correction, signaling the errors, but also some metalinguistic feedback. But there are different types. It can be focused or unfocused, in the sense that if it's focused and I am teaching just the prepositions in English, I will focus myself on those errors and I will just correct those. If it's unfocused, I will correct all the errors, doesn't matter, grammar, spelling, mechanics, on the document. There are also direct and indirect written corrective feedback. So when it's direct, I'm giving the answer. When it's indirect, I'm somehow letting the student know. So I want them to look for themselves the correct answer. And also we have the synchronous or asynchronous. Like for example, if it's synchronous, is because we are having an activity that we are all, for example, working on Google Drive, and I'm correcting at the same time that they are making their mistakes. Or if it's asynchronous, it's the normal one, the one that we are all used to. And yeah, you give a composition to your teacher and your teacher give it back to you 1 or 2 days later. It seems that written corrective feedback facilitates corrections. Vale? There are many studies that prove this. And regarding the types of written corrective feedback, research suggests that focus and unfocus, there is an inconclusive picture. Both works, but they don't know which one is better. Direct versus indirect, both have positive effects on writing accuracy in the short term, but direct feedback seems to be better for beginners, and indirect feedback should be better. It's better for more advanced language learners. And regarding synchronous and asynchronous, experimental groups usually outperform the control groups. So it seems that giving feedback at the same time that the students is making the error facilitates language learning. But still, there is a lot of research to be done, because many people can argue that if they are writing and I'm correcting at the same time, I'm also overwhelming them in the sense that their cognitive capacity cannot deal with thinking about what they want to say, knowing how to say it, and at the same time, getting the feedback that I'm giving and processing that feedback. Vale? So still, there is a lot to do in that regard. Bueno, there is regarding spell checkers, Lin, Liu, and Paz, they made a very great study where they divided their participants in 4 groups. One that had their mistakes red underlined, another one that has their mistakes red underlined, but they could use a dictionary. Another group could have used a spell checker. And obviously, like always, there was a control group with not spelling aids. There were 88 Taiwanese L2 learners of English. They have to proofread an existing test, and the method was a pre-post test. The spelling accuracy was measured by 23 misspelled words used in 2 different passages. They found that the 3 experimental groups, red underline plus dictionary and spell checker, outperformed the control group. However, the ecology validity of this work is at stake, since the students were correcting something that was already written by someone and not correcting their own writing. They were not writing at the same time that they were getting the feedback. Still, the results are important, but that's why we wanted also to see if the results can change if the students were the one writing themselves their output. Bueno, and what is a spell checker? A test editing software, which are grammar and spell checkers, try to detect and correct possible deviation from correct use of grammar and spelling of a particular language in a writing test. How they do so? Grammar checkers use what is known as engrams. What do? I look for collocations. I look how probable 2 words can appear together. For example, if someone writes here, he are, the grammar checker is going to look and they are going to see that there is a low probability that these 2 words appear together in a corpus of reference. A corpus of reference is just books, novel, romance, etc., that they are stored there in a computer. So what the grammar checker does is look for these a string of words, these two words, all around all this corpus and see if they appear or not. Obviously, they do not appear because it's a mistake, so they highlight it. The same with a string of people, or of words of 3, like people who is, that's a 3-gram. The first one is a bigram. This one is a 3-gram, and in a few occasions will be a 4-gram. Okay, they took a string of words and look for them. Also allows the detection of punctuation errors. On the other hand, spell checkers, they use edit distance. What is that? They took each word as a string of letters. What is a word? Something between spaces. Vale? I put a space, letters, another space. And what they look is that every string of letters between 2 spaces appear or not in the corpus of reference. Vale? After that, they can find mistakes like deletions, like experience, and instead of experience, insertions, to piece, substitutions, or transpositions, transposing the order of letters. What is the problem? Well, usually spell checkers are designed for native speakers. Now, when I'm writing, all I want is to speed up my writing. So what I expect from Word is to facilitate my writing. So even if it autocorrects, my spelling is even better because I keep writing. Vale? So they are designed for native writers. What's the problem with that? That they believe that errors are due to a minimal deviation from the correct spelling, meaning that this distance, the number of letters that you have to change to get to the correct spelling is just 1. But the problem is, like L2 language learners, they do not make mistakes because they made a slip. No, because I'm typing and suddenly I type the Y instead of the U just because they are close to each other in the keyboard. No, they make errors because they lack of linguistic knowledge. So for example, if I'm writing different, I know that is with 2 Fs. Vale? However, if a Spaniard who is learning English is trying to write different, maybe he's going to write it with just 1 F because in Spanish it's diferente with just 1 F. So maybe if Word autocorrects that error, he's never going to notice that he has made an error, and he's going to keep writing thinking that, well, I've done well. Meanwhile, maybe that's not the case. Vale? Also, they might not detect all errors. For example, homophones, beer versus beer, style versus style. Okay, so for example, if I'm a learner of English and I want to write beer, but I write the other one, Word is not going to correct it because it's still a word. It's a word that appears on the corpus. And obviously, it's not going to be able to detect it as an error because the string of letters between spaces is going to appear there. The same with other real words, with, between, with, tough versus tough, vale? There, what it's going to do is not going to change. It's not going to be a transposition error. And as I say, they automatically correct some spelling mistakes. Bueno, what's the problem with all that? For example, Mitton and Okada found out that out of these 7 attempts of Japanese students to write library, liberally, vale? Japanese students were writing all these. Word was just able to give the correct alternative to offer it in just 2 cases, library and library. In the rest of them, Word was not able to give the correct answer, to offer it in the list of alternatives. Obviously, that's a problem for a student, okay? Even more, there is evidence that L2 learners are often misled by this suggestion because they assume, and my next paper proves this, that the correct word is always among the alternatives. And also, they believe that the correct one is always the first. ¿Vale? That also has happened to me as a language learner. I'm a language learner of English. I'm a language learner of French. I'm still learning the language, as you can see. And that happens to me when I'm typing. I believe that what they are suggesting me is the correct one. And maybe it's not the case. For example, Hayf and Rod found out that 38% of the cases, that was not true in 38% of the cases. And me, myself, I found out that in 27% of the cases was also not true. So we are talking 1 out of 3 words. But obviously, there are spell checkers specifically designed for L2 learners of Spanish. However, in another study, I found out that even if they do not automatically correct errors, they still offer a list of potential alternatives and they do not detect all errors. Still, 1 out of 3 errors made L2 learners of Spanish could not be corrected using them. So, what is all this study about? I found out that spelling is important. I know that it's important because I review all that in the literature review. After that, I decided, okay, let's see if spell checkers can help, how they work. I found out how they work. I find out that there were already 16 spell checkers specifically designed for L2 learners of Spanish. There were some, so I decided, okay, let's see if they are worthy of using them or not, because if not, was this the point for me to making a spell checker if there are already alternatives? I look at them, I make a study, and I try to find out. No, I take from a corpus, I make my students make different composition. I took it from a corpus, I input all the composition in different spell checkers with Microsoft Word as a control group. In this case, well, it's not a group, but we can call it as control. And I find out that, well, they didn't work properly. So I keep going. Okay, we don't have yet a spell checker that actually works for L2 learners. So let's keep going. So we decided to build one, and this is the one that we decided to build. That provides this kind of feedback. What we wanted is not just to suggest an alternative, because for me, as a native speaker, to choose between a list of alternatives is kind of easy and straightforward, because I know the error that I made, because for me it was a performance error, a slip. But maybe for a student, the mistake was a mistake made out of lack of linguistic knowledge, ¿vale? A competence error. So that's why I have to provide them with some feedback. Like, for example, diferente. I have translated, the feedback is in Spanish. But for example, if they make that error, I give them the solution, but at the same time, I'm telling them that no Spanish words have 2 Fs. With that, we believe that they just not can correct their mistake, but also they can avoid in the future potential mistakes like oficina or dificultar or efecto or coffee, because all these are words that in English are written with 2 Fs, but not in Spanish. Vale? So that's the idea. And well, that's how it looks. But obviously, we build the spell checker, but we build a prototype before getting farther, no? Because obviously you have to apply for money, you have to involve many people building a spell checker. So first, we need to know that if our prototype works. So what we do is to trial that prototype with people. Vale? And these were our research questions. First, to what extent does synchronous and focused direct feedback from Microsoft Word and our pedagogic spell checker lead to improvements in spelling accuracy in new writing as compared to a control group receiving no written corrective feedback? The second, to what extent does one of the 2 spell checkers, Microsoft Word or our spell checker, lead to a greater improvements in spelling accuracy than the other? The third one, Microsoft Word, to what extent there is a difference in the effects of spelling accuracy between errors which are autocorrected and those which are not. Here we wanted to see if noticing an error was an important covariate to take into account. And the last one is to what extent there is a difference in the time taken to write using one or the other. Why so? Because maybe my spell checker is better, but if it takes quite a lot of time because there is a pedagogic feedback involved, maybe user cannot gonna use it, or maybe the results might be misleading, because if there is a difference between the results of one group and the other, it can be just because of the difference of times instead of the difference of the feedback given, ¿vale? Or provided. So we made this research design. We have a pre, post, delayed post test. The students, 107 students, were block stratified. You were divided in 3 groups using a block stratified randomization. Block stratified because we took it into account gender and proficiency level of Spanish, but then we randomized the sample. Then we have 5 days of treatment where they were using, so first they have a pre-test using Notepad, no feedback, nothing, they all completed. At the same time, they did a questionnaire and we measured their proficiency level. Then they went divided randomly in 3 groups. Then they have the treatment. Each one they were using a different spell checker. One was using hours, another one was using just Microsoft Word, and the other one was getting no feedback at all. We did also a stimulated recall interview to know how the students, I will explain you what is that later, ¿vale? How they interact with the spell checkers. Then we did the post-test and second questionnaire, and then a delayed post-test. As you can see, we had more than 300 questionnaires, 12 recall interviews, and 107 students doing the pre-post, delayed post-test. These were our sample, our participants. As I say, 107 students, 35 males, 72 females, English, Chinese, and French, and with their respective proficiency level. What was the problem? We had some attrition in the post-test. There were just 82 remaining participants, and in the delayed post-test, there were just 56. Why so? Well, it was not compulsory. They were doing a course in Toledo. It was a summer course. Obviously, we couldn't force them to do so. They had to participate in the study at the end of their classes, and many of them preferred to go and have some tapas instead of being with me doing this. And I completely understand them. Well, as I say, first, we did a placement test to know their proficiency level. We used the Oxford Language Center test. After that, we did the pre, post, delayed post test, some questionnaires, and stimulated recall interviews. The pre, post, delayed post test was done in Notepad to assure that they did not have any kind of feedback. So they were just typing, nothing happened there, you just type. And we were using transcription tasks. They were listening some sentences and they were typing them. You can ask, why are you using transcription task and not, I don't know, a translation task, for example? Well, it's because we pilot all the sentences that we wanted. And obviously, we need that some spelling mistakes were, since we were piloting a prototype, we need that some words had feedback included in our prototype. So we needed specific words to be highlighted by our prototype. And we find out in the pilot study that many students, when they were translated, they used avoiding strategies. I don't know the direct translation, so I will find a synonym. And obviously that it does not work for us because they are not typing the words that we want them to type, because we were just looking for spelling mistakes. Vale? So we piloted with some students in Oxford. At the same time that we pilot for that, we pilot in that study, we find out if all the pre, post, delayed post test, all the sentences that were included in this test were equally difficult, because obviously if they are not equally difficult, they are going to distort my results later. So I need to know if the 3 of them are equally difficult. Vale? So finally, we end up with 17 sentences, each one with 122 words, containing 26 target spelling errors. Each target spelling error corresponds to a specific spelling pattern. How do we choose the target spelling errors? Well, first, they must be frequently misspelled words. How do we find out? In a corpus, as I told you, many words written by language learners. Vale? So we find out that diferente was a mistake that they used to do. Jardín, well, they don't usually put the accent at the end. Vale? They also follow a specific spelling pattern. Vale? For example, francés, Portugués, Holandés, Inglés, all these are nationality words, and all of them end in S, and all of them are accentuated in the last ES. Correct me, must provide feedback, because if not, obviously we cannot compare it. We cannot trial our prototype. And also we need a criteria to choose the words, ¿vale? Because we cannot put words that they do not know, because they are, bueno, language learners. So we were looking for frequent words. And also, since we wanted to prove that they were, if noticing an error or not was important, and we are going to do so by using Microsoft Word, because if we input some words and you make a mistake, they direct out Microsoft Word directly autocorrect it. But in another cases, with some words, they give you a list of alternatives. We were inputting all the words in Word to see if Word gives an alternative or directly autocorrects. So actually, it took quite a lot of time to find out the words and the spelling mistakes. Bueno, there was a transcription task. You can see it here, me talking.
Mi amigo francés tiene un jardín bonito.
Vale, at the same time, the sentences have to be short and simple. Why? Because obviously one of the things, something that we also have to take into account is that if they are doing a transcription task, this is also taking some overloading their cognitive capacities. So we have to keep it as simple as possible so it does not interfere with what we are measuring. Anyway, since we have randomized the sample, even if this affects the results, it's going to affect it equally across the 3 groups. So that's also control. Why I'm paying so much attention about methodology here, and in case there are students who are doing their final thesis, 4-year undergrads, it's because we are dealing with people in our field in applied linguistics. We deal with people and we are all different. So we have to, our methodology have to take into account every possible covariate, something that can affect our results, ¿vale? So at least this is all settled. Bien. Treatment, 5 sessions. We divided in 3 groups, as I say. One was using ours, Microsoft Word, and control group. All of them were similar in format, but different in content. And the students stopwatch. So using Chronomy, when they finish their task, they stop the clock. So like this, we know exactly how long they take to do the task with one or the other, ¿vale? To later on compare it. Bien. What do we use? Questionnaires, stimulated recurrent interviews, but this is for the next paper that I'm writing, okay, to see the qualitative result, how they interact with spell checkers, how they see a spelling, if it's important for them, if they have been taught about it, what do they do with an spell checker. And that's why we use stimulated recurrent interviews, because questionnaires allows you to have a lot of information for many participants, but not in depth, ¿vale? They give you a lot of information, but it's not depth information. That's why you need an interview to get there with the student and see how, especially when you are trying to figure out what is the process what they are doing, how they interact with a spell checker. And that's why we took some volunteers for the stimulate recall interview. What is a stimulate recall interview? So we use their own task as an stimulus. So we record them doing their task with a screencastify, and after that, we play it for them. You can see them writing here. They are writing. I'm sitting next to him or her, and I am like, why suddenly you're going down there? Why do you repeat the audio? Why you decided to right click there on Word? Why do you choose Jardín rather than the other? Vale? That's a stimulated record interview, and that's allowed us to see. Well, also comparing with the questionnaires, and you always have to triangulate the result, the quantitative result with the qualitative result, especially if you are doing a mixed method study like this one. Bueno, data analysis. To answer research question 1 and 2, we compare the effects of the 3 conditions, our prototype, Microsoft Word, and control, on participant spelling new writing, investigating the immediate effects, seeing the target spelling errors scores and the other spelling errors score, the same for pre, post, delay, post test. To investigate noticing, as I told you, we will compare the scores of the students in the autocorrected items and not autocorrected items, and to see the time, as I already told you, they were timing themselves, and after that we statistically compare their timing. But for all this, it's super important to define what we consider a spelling error, because if not, obviously someone can knock on my door and say, well, your results are not accurate because what is a spelling error? What do you consider a spelling error? What are the difference between a grammar error and a spelling error? Because for example, an error in a conjugation in Spanish is a spelling error, is a grammar error. So what did I do? You have to be very clear defining terms. And for example, I define a spelling error as any sequence of letters between spaces that does not appear in the dictionary. Also, I choose this definition because it was convenient for me, and it was convenient for me because I'm working with spell checkers. And I told you that the spell checkers work with sequence of letters, ¿vale? Maybe if I was doing something different, another kind of study, I might choose another definition of a spelling error, ¿vale? You just have to justify yourself always when you are doing step by step, justifying every single decision you are taking. And then how do we classify spelling errors? Well, we have the target spelling errors, those that we have selected first, and I already told you how. But obviously, students can make other spelling errors in the transcription. How are we going to count them? Pues bueno, other spelling error is any word spelled incorrectly without committing a target spelling error. Or a committed another error in the same word with a target spelling error. So it's not the error. Imagine that Francés was written without accent, but at the same time with capital F. Pues that counts an other spelling error and a target spelling error, because the ES is a target spelling error, the F is an other spelling error. And obviously, since there was a transcription, we also count the non-written words, ¿vale? When they were not able to write what they were listening. But that's just appear in 6 occasions, who actually made us discard it, ¿vale? And not take it into account. Bueno, what was the problem? Again, I told you we had attrition, ¿vale? And obviously we have to control for it, because if I have 107 students and in the post-test there are just 82, and in the delayed post-test there are just 56, how do I know? How can I compare the students in the first pre-test with the students in the delayed post-test? Maybe the remaining ones are the best ones, are not, and obviously I cannot compare them, no? So what we do is see first if the attrition was evenly distributed across groups. That was the case. And then we did an independent sample t-test to see what was their scores of the attritors, ¿vale? Comparing with the non-attritors, ¿vale? And we saw that, for example, in the control group, in the pretest, the people who left the study made significantly more mistakes than the people who remain in the study. So there we have a problem, because the remaining ones in the control group are better than the ones that left, which is something that does not happen in the other groups. So now we have to see if that's the case in all the, ¿vale? Given that the loss of almost 1/4, we also have to see it in the post-test, ¿vale? We did it there, and no evidence of attrition bias was found, ¿vale? The results were not significant at post-test level, but they were significant at the late post level. So finally, we couldn't see, we couldn't study the long-term effects because our delayed post-test sample was compromised because of the attrition. So we could just study the post-test, ¿vale? As you can see here, they are more or less even, ¿vale? 10, 9, 10, 11, 11, 11. The standard deviation is more or less equal. We also look if all the groups at the pre-test level, at the very beginning, they were equally in terms of gender, L1 background, and if they have practiced at home or not, and we measured that with a questionnaire. No significant difference was found between the groups. So we could include gender background and this as a covariate in our statistical well, in our statistics. Sorry about that. That was, have you seen? That was not a performance error. That was a competent error for my lack of linguistic knowledge. Do you understand, right? I couldn't find the word I was looking for. Bien. Bueno, what we found out, looking at the target spelling errors score, we find out that there was all the group decreased significantly, especially those of the experimental groups, those using a spell checker. The one with our prototype decrease, it was significant. The p-value is less than 0.01, but also, ¿vale? And this is, sorry about it. It's important. If you are doing statistics, you need to state the effect side, ¿vale? It's not enough with the significant value, ¿vale? With the p-value, because what you are saying there is that, okay, the results are not due to chance, which is important, but also it's important to see in what amount this is not, ¿vale? How big is that effect? Why? Because, for example, if I have a super large sample, obviously it's kind of easy that my p-value is significant, ¿vale? Just because the sample is getting there. So that's why it's also important to, for example, just to use that. But when we find out that all the groups decrease significantly, except the control group, that they approach significance, we then compare the groups. We see that all of them decreased. Now let's compare all of them. And we found no significant difference between groups. And then we conducted an ANOVA saying, ¿vale? There is no significant difference at the pre-test. But what we want to see if they have improved or not. So now we are seeing that the pre-test is perfectly balanced. Now we'll see if they have improved. And there was a significant effect of group with a large effect size. ¿Vale? A post-hoc text Bonferroni showed that the PSC group scored significantly lower. Once we know that there are difference between groups at the post-test, not at the pre-test. At the pre-test there were none, but at the post-test there are difference between groups. So obviously something is happening there. So let's see what is happening. And for example, we see that the one that we're using our prototype improved. The one using the Microsoft Word also improved, and the control group also did did improve, but not as much as the other, ¿vale? And actually, the PSC group their improvement was significantly better than the other two, but the Microsoft Word and the control group, there was no difference between them. Bueno, here you can see. And we did the same with the other spelling errors. All of them decreased significantly. But the PSC, the post-test score was on the boundary of significance, and the control group, there was no significant difference between the pre-test and the post-test scores. One way ANOVA found no significant difference between the groups, pre-test, other spelling errors. But when we conducted a one-way ANCOVA to test for significance between the groups in the post-test, we found no significant effect of group was found, ¿vale? So Microsoft Word and our prototype decreased the number of other spelling errors from pre-test to the post-test. The control group didn't. However, there was no significant difference between the three groups at the post-test, meaning that that decrease was not significant. They have not improved that much, ¿vale? Here you have the results. Autocorrection. The comparison between autocorrected and not autocorrected was made for all three experimental groups. This allowed us to check whether any significant difference found between the two categories could actually be attributed to autocorrection rather than being an artifact of the items themselves. For the PSC group, there was significantly fewer target spelling errors at the post-test than the pre-test. In both autocorrected and non-autocorrected errors. For the Microsoft group, there was no significant difference between the pre and post-test scores for autocorrected. This gives us an important clue, but there was significantly fewer errors at the post-test for non-autocorrected. People in the Microsoft Word group improved in those errors that actually Word provide feedback on. Those that were autocorrected, they didn't improve. That tell us something about noticing. And for the control group, there were no significant difference between pre and post-test. Here you have autocorrected errors, non-autocorrected errors. And time demands. Bueno, we found no significant difference in time taken between the three groups. In other words, there was no evidence that writing in L2 took participants longer using any one of the software packages than the others. Discussion. What do we found doing all this experiment? That there was a tendency for all participants to become more accurate at the spelling over the course of the 5-day intervention. So teaching them helps. We found evidence that the pedagogic feedback offered by our prototype was more advantageous for developing participant spelling accuracy than Microsoft Word inbuilt spell checker and no feedback. That might be because of the nature of our feedback that provides metalinguistic feedback. Sorry for the redundancy. Our study is also consistent with previous evidence of core research and contribute to the growing evidence suggesting that direct, focused, synchronous written corrective feedback can be effective in improving foreign language learner accuracy in new writing. Obviously, this has pedagogic implication because if our feedback works and is provided by a computer, teachers won't lose time correcting the activities of the students. And therefore, they can use that time to teach something else, like grammar or pronunciation or whatever, because this work can be done by the students at home, by the students themselves. Noticing errors. Participants in the Microsoft group showed no advantage over the control group in the development of their spelling accuracy of targeted spelling errors over the course of the intervention, despite receiving systematic synchronous feedback. Why is so? Why the Microsoft group showed no advantage over the control group? Well, the key to understand this apparently is the contrasting findings between autocorrected and non-autocorrected errors, because participants in the Microsoft group showed a significant decrease in the number of non-autocorrected target spelling errors with a large effect size, but no significant decrease in the number of autocorrected. We hypothesized that the crucial difference between autocorrected and non-autocorrected errors is that the latter promote noticing errors and noticing the gap between these errors and the correct forms. By contrast, autocorrections happen instantaneously and quite possibly without the learner's awareness, hence impeding noticing and in turn, learning. They don't know they are making a mistake, so they cannot correct it and therefore they cannot learn it. It has to do with the noticing hypothesis of Smith, 1990, and with the output hypothesis of Swain, 1998. Accuracy of the not targeted spellings. We also measured that. Between groups, comparison found no significant advantage for any of the groups over others in terms of increased accuracy on other spelling errors. However, we did find different patterns of change over time in the three groups. Participants in the Microsoft group showed a significant decrease in the numbers of other spelling errors. Bueno, that was expected since Microsoft Word does not differentiate between these two kinds of errors and obviously can provide feedback, ¿vale? To one or the other. We are not talking about corrected or autocorrected. Here we are talking about target spelling error and other spelling errors. Remember that. The control group, by contrast, showed no change in the numbers of other spelling errors. They do not improve. Obviously, that's also expected, no, because they are not receiving feedback. But interestingly, however, the PSC group, the decrease of other spelling errors touched the threshold of significance with a small to medium effect size. We are unsure why the PSC group should have shown this tendency towards greater accuracy in spelling not targeting for and the control group. Given that they received no feedback on these errors, remember that this group just received feedback on target spelling errors because it was a prototype and they could just receive feedback on those. So why? Why suddenly they also almost decreased? No, because it's there in the threshold of significance. Perhaps their sensitivity to Spanish spelling patterns in general had been heightened by the feedback provided by the PSC, since they were for 5 days trained with that and the program was making them aware of some spelling rules. Maybe they were more aware about other spelling errors than the control group that the poor guys, they were just listening and transcribing using notepads. Notepad. Anyway, this merits further investigation. And well, the results of all this as I told you, you can find all these papers online. I always try to publish in open access. That's a personal motto. And well, you have one in language learning and technology, another one in the Journal of Social Science and Humanities, and the last one in the Australian called EG. And as I say, I'm writing the last one now that hopefully will be published in the Modern Language Journal very soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Blázquez, for that very informative lecture. The floor is now open for questions from our audience. I have here already 2 questions. Let's do the first one. So the first one is, what are the common mistakes of Filipino learners of Spanish?
Well, common mistakes. Again, we have to define mistakes. If you are talking about the spelling mistakes.
Yes, maybe it is spelling mistakes.
Accentuation, ¿vale? But that's not just for the Filipino, that's for everyone, because we have a strange, I mean, for example, Anglo-Saxon, they don't have accents, so obviously for it's something strange. French people, they have accents, but they just have it on the E, and it's for differentiate the sound of different S, no? But you can correct me because I'm not. But for example, for us is to point out which syllable is the one that has the stress.
The accent.
And we just accentuate it depending on the last letter. So, ¿vale? So that's always difficult. Obviously, H has no sound, so that's difficult for Filipino students. G and J, ¿vale? All this is regarding spelling. They also have problems differentiating the E and the I sounds, E. Sometimes they also make like the Arabs pilo or pelo. But again, this is something that could be interesting to study in detail, that we can do it. We just have to make them do some compositions, and after that, making a corpus. There are kind of many softwares that allow you to make a corpus, and after that, you just analyze the different compositions and look there what mistakes are the most common. So actually, if everyone is interested, go for it for your final thesis.
Right. Okay. So the second, thank you for the answer for that. So the second question is, the study is very interesting and useful. So the question is, why did you choose students with English, Chinese, and French as L1 as your respondents? And regarding that, a follow-up question to that is, how useful do you think will this spelling checker be to Filipino students who are studying Spanish?
Vale, regarding the first question, it was just a matter of logistics. There was the summer course in the Universidad de Castilla-La Mancha in Toledo, and they have a student from the United States, from France, and from China. So we did it with all of them. And well, for this part of the study, we take it into account the 3 of them, because we see that the L1 was not a covariate that could affect our results. However, for the study that I'm doing now, for the questionnaires, at the very end, I have decided to take out the answers of those done by French and Chinese, because they were answering their questionnaires not in their native language, but in the L2, and somehow that can distort the results. But obviously, since I did that and I'm taking a part of my sample, I have to acknowledge all that in the limitations. Vale? And this is also something that you should do, because finally you are doing something that is not appropriate, but finally at the same time, when you are doing research, you also have to, I mean, ideally, no, you have people from every nationality, different students, but that's not easy in real life. No, you find out you have to go there. I don't know, like if I do a study in the Philippines, pues obviously my sample is going to be with Filipino students. And that's what I have. And maybe Filipino students from UP, that for sure they are going to differ from Filipino students from high school or from the Cervantes, okay? Because you are getting different education, you are different people, vale? But at the very end also logistics plays a role, and the only thing is that you just have to acknowledge there in the limitation. So the researchers that later on are citing your work in order to build their statement, they can also know, well, they did that, but they acknowledge that there are some inconveniences with this and that might have affect the results, so we have to take them with care, vale? Finally, you cannot control everything. Regarding the second, yes, obviously we have done this, because as I say, I have translated the feedback, but the feedback is in Spanish. The feedback that you get from Correct Me is in Spanish, so actually anyone can use it, because our idea is that people worldwide can use it. Yes, obviously, there were more Anglo-Saxon because in that specific language core, there were many Americans. That's it, that's all.
Yes, thank you for answering our questions. Actually, I find that really interesting that the corrections are in Spanish, and I was actually wondering if the learners were able to understand those corrections. Okay, so that's it for our questions. No other questions are coming in from our FB Live, Facebook Live. So let's the question. So it's from Dr. Sibayan Sarmiento. I think the selection of participants is good because of the contrasts of their L1 systems, Germanic, Romance, and Chinese. Did you say that regardless of their L1, the orthographic errors remained constant? Because you might have missed it during your lecture.
Yeah, they remain constant during the pre-post. As I said, the late post test, we didn't evaluate the results because there was a huge attrition. So we just skip it. But between the pre-post test, yes, the spelling mistakes were constant. However, there is even in the sample, as I say, you can see it here. Can I share my screen again? ¿Dónde están los participants? Aquí. As you can see, there were much more English, Anglo-Saxon students than Chinese and French. So for example, we cannot compare Romance language with English because there are just two French people comparing with English, and also the Chinese is just let's say a quarter of what we have with the English. So I will not dare to compare the groups in terms of L1, even if we have seen that I will not dare to compare it statistically, because for sure it's going to be a significant difference there, just because of the side of the sample. But yeah, if you just want the raw data, yeah, they were more or less consistent between English, Chinese, and French. That will be something interesting to study in further detail if we manage to have a sample, an even sample of English, Chinese, and French, as you say, Romance,
Germanic,
and anything.
Thank you very much, Dr. Blázquez, for answering that question. So we're now at the point that we're going to award the certificates of participation, of appreciation to Dr. De La Peña, to our lecturers. Let me just read the text of the certificates. First, for Professor De La Peña, the certificate of appreciation is awarded to Professor Wystan De La Peña for presenting his research, Sina Lanot at Lopez, at mga bagong tendensiya sa Panulaang Pilipino sa Kastila. in the Bahaginan Research Forum given on 28 October 2021 at the University of the Philippines, Diliman, Quezon City. Signed, Jimwell C. Naval, PhD, Dean, College of Arts and Letters, University of the Philippines, Diliman, and Jason D. Petras, PhD, Associate Dean for Research, Creative Work, and Publication, College of Arts and Letters, University of the Philippines, Diliman. And the same, almost the same text for Dr. Blázquez, awarded to Dr. Miguel Blázquez for presenting his research, The Didactic Potential of Spell Checkers, Improving the Spelling Accuracy in L2 Spanish Learners. So we have reached the end of our webinar. Congratulations. Thank you very much again, Dr. De La Peña, Professor De La Peña, and Dr. Blázquez. And let me just go to our announcement so that you can save the date for our next Bahaginan Research Forum. There will be one on November 20, 2021. The Tanghalan sa Tahanan, Dikha at Saliksik ng Ganap sa Dula by our lecturer will be Professor Dr. Glecy C. Atienza. And on the 26th of November, another one, a panel discussion on surviving critical conditions, putting up a fight amidst pandemonium over a pandemic in the Philippines. And the panel will be Professor Oscar Cerquina Jr., Professor Olivia Christine Nieto, Professor Charles Erizolaria, and Professor Junes Crisostomo. So please save those dates for our next Bahaginan Forum, Bahaginan Research Forums. Again, thank you everyone for participating. Thank you again, Dr. Blázquez and Professor De La Peña. I hope you go. We see you again as in our next Bahaginan Research Forums. Thank you and magandang hapon po sa ating lahat.